It was just a fluke. People thought at that time of opening an independent bookstore was just completely crazy. It was at a time that bookstores were beginning to fall victim to the chain stores.
What was lacking in the chains was a knowledge and an appreciation and a love of books. And that if you convey that love of books in a bricks and mortar store, you could accomplish something. Carla also knew what she didn't know, and that's where Barbara comes into the picture. First as a manager and then as a partner, and the two were really married together for 25 years.
Well, I think the greatest challenge, where that I put most of my energies, was in maintaining a good, harmonious partnership. You had to have a good, strong, harmonious partnership for the store to do well.
They were so different from one another. As Barbara once said, she was the quiet, introspective cat who would creep into a room, stay on the perimeter, observe everything quietly. Carla was quite the opposite. She was gregarious, she was loud, she was invasive, and she was the dog, and she would bound into the room and bounce up on everyone and lick everyone. And somehow that partnership, the two dissimilar women who were combined in their passion for books, worked.
So one of the most important moments in the history of the store is when it crossed the street. In fact, I think that there were T-shirts that were given out at the time about the bookstore that crossed the street. And what was so beautiful about the exercise in moving was that it was a communal activity, that customers were enlisted to be the mules, more or less. So we loaded up boxes and we actually walked them to the other side of Connecticut Avenue, which was such a perfectly Politics and Prose activity, because the line between the customer and the store were completely blurred. We weren't customers, we were community.
Obviously when Carla passed away, and then another big change when new owners took over the store, and many longtime customers came up and said, please don't change. And at Carla's memorial, I mentioned that Carla would have gotten angry at those words, because Carla was always about change. Carla was always about, if something had been felt even the least bit stale, you change it. Even if it's successful, you change it. And the store growing in positive changes with Brad and Lissa is all stuff that Carla would have smiled on and she would have approved of, I think.
You know, when the bookstore first went up for sale in 2010, Lissa and I were concerned about who might end up owning it, but we didn't think it would be us. We'd never really thought about going into a business. But some friends encouraged us to throw our hat in the ring, and one thing led to another, and we thought that after talking to a number of other bookstores around the country, that this would be maybe something worth doing. We certainly believed in the mission of Politics and Prose, and thought that we could contribute in some way.
Well, I just have to revise slightly what Brad said, because actually he was the one encouraged to pursue ownership of the store, and I thought he was nuts. I didn't see there was any way he was going to actually own Politics and Prose, which of course was this incredible, iconic bookstore in Washington. So, but I did come along and got really excited about the prospect, and we were lucky enough to be selected, and it's been a great adventure ever since. I think it's really worth noting just for a minute that one of the reasons Politics and Prose has been able to do what it has been able to do in the last 13 years or so is because Brad and I were very fortunate that one of the previous owners, Barbara Meade, was so incredibly kind and generous to us when we became the owners. And she stayed on and tutored us and advised us and guided us with this very, very loving and gentle hand, but also with great experience and wisdom and skill that she had built up in her extraordinary career as a bookseller. So Barbara deserves a lot of credit, and we are eternally grateful to her.
Well, one of the things that I have heard a number of times, and it's been very touching for me, is authors saying that during the time that they were writing their book, that what kept them going and finally got them to finish was that their intermittent fantasies the whole time of the evening that they were going to be a Politics and Prose for their book event.
I was at home when I was, watching a lot of Politics and Prose, thinking that, oh, maybe I could do that. I could be there, be here in this iconic space. I'm here. So if you're dreaming about that, it definitely could happen. So keep writing, keep writing.
Give it up.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Politics and Prose, because when I first came out with my first book, it's one of the few places where I actually did a reading. And I think at least 20, 30 people showed up, which, was probably my best turnout outside of 57th Street Books in Chicago. So I just want to say thank you.
In total, we do probably about maybe 500 or more events a year. And that's a more conservative estimate. So yeah, the events here are a really integral part of the bookstore. Events have been such an important part of P&P for so long. I think we're trying really hard to, keep the spirit of the bookstore alive in our events, but we're also, like I said, trying to welcome a lot of new voices and new perspectives and just kind of switch things up and keep people on their toes.
And here we are at the resplendent grandeur of Tregarin Conservancy. We are doing a nature walk today. This is something the bookstore offers in its varied programming. I oversee classes, trips, and walks. With COVID, we expanded our programming online. And now we have a greater reach than we ever had across the United States and around the world.
We are sitting in our newest Union Market location at 1324 4th Street Northeast. We opened in the Union Market neighborhood in June of 2018, just one street over. With the support of the Union Market District community, we moved into this much larger space in January of 2024. Our expansion is not limited to Union Market. We opened our Wharf location in October of 2017. And just recently, as of last September 2023, moved into a beautiful space in the retail portion of the Atlantic Magazine building. With the addition of the Union Market location and the Wharf location, we've expanded Politics and Prose into 3 of the 4 quadrants in Washington, D.C., expanding our customer base and really bringing the Politics and Prose product to so many more communities. I always say, Politics and Prose has some of the best booksellers in the world. And I'm really lucky to get to work with them.
I've spent most of my time when I'm in this bookstore down in the children's section, whether it be doing a signing or a reading or bopping around, hanging out with some of the best people who have worked here over the years. People like Mary Alice, who I miss dearly, people like Donna. These are wonderful human beings who not only love children's books, but also love the children who come and shop in that section. And for the community, I think, whether it's this one, whether it's the ones on the other side of the city, the many other sort of outposts, I think that Politics and Prose is one of the pillars of the entire city. I think, when you think about a bookstore outside of the city, if you think about like the Strand in New York, Powell's over in the Northwest, I think when people say DC, when it comes to bookstores, they're going to say P&P.
I was teaching at Green Acres School in the lower grades, and then Greenie Newberg, and Greenie asked if I would be interested in joining her and a couple of other people in starting a children's bookstore there. And I said, sure, why not? And the 4 of us started a bookstore. called Cheshire Cat, and it was a great store.
Yes.
And we were there for 20-some years.
We couldn't believe our good fortunes that you had brought Cheshire Cat to Politics and Prose.
Right.
That was incredible. So
It was Cheshire Cat at Politics and Prose. Yeah.
And that's when the section really took off.
Yeah.
And you brought a very devoted following. You brought all your relationships with schools and libraries.
Books, bookshelves.
And you literally brought bookcases, yes,
Yeah.
and tables. these, those.
Right. Yes.
Since we've been around for now 40 years, I mean, it's really amazing. And that's mostly, a lot of it is thanks to customers who just come in, continue coming in every day or every month, or even if you come once every year, this is great. You go to a bookstore and you pick up a book, that means a lot. And I'm very excited that definitely over the years, I think there's a lot more new customers are coming in as well, and that's been especially since we opened Union Market and the Wharf. That is a whole sort of different demographic in those areas, and they often want slightly different books that we maybe carry at Connecticut Avenue. But I think this just makes us a better, stronger bookstore in that we have this wide range of books. All we want from sort of readers and customers to come in and to the bookstore and be curious and wanting to look at things that we offer, and they just sort of hope to discover something that they might not have seen before.
I have a very special relationship with this place because last year I was writing my master's thesis and I was in one of these chairs every day writing. So it's interesting now to have become a barista, a supervisor, and now the coffeehouse manager, to be here and see how it's evolved. You know, it was so different than when I was just a customer to how it is now. And I see these wonderful changes happening. You know, we have so many wonderful customers, so many regulars that we love to see every day. And it's just really special to me and important that we just have, you know, amidst all these changes and evolutions, we maintain this safe, cozy environment.
I moved to this neighborhood in 1987. Politics and Prose had been established on the west side of Connecticut Avenue in 1984. And I finished the first book that I ever wrote. It was about the West Point class of 1966. I finished writing it in the fall of 1988, and as I typed the last sentence of the last chapter, and I thought, well, what does an author do when they finish a book? And I thought, well, you go hang out with other authors. So I walked down Nebraska Avenue across Connecticut to Politics and Prose, which was really just a hole in the wall at that time, to have the experience of communing with other authors, even if it was just through their books. I made that ritual a habit, and it eventually became a superstition, so that every time I have finished a book, 8 times now, since that first time in 1988, I do the same thing. I come to Politics and Prose. I hang out with my fellow authors, metaphorically, and it's an important part of book writing to me. It's the thing that I have to do when I finish a book.
I have been fortunate enough to have had events here for all 3 of my novels. And I've also been here for other people's events and done a lot of interviewing and hosting. This has been a really important bookstore for me. When I first moved to DC 25 years ago, I was really intimidated, I'll have to say, by independent bookstores in general, not just this one. And this was the first bookstore where I felt welcome. I was in here one day and I began to talk to a bookseller, and she was so kind. I wish I could remember her name. And that was the beginning of my, love and my relationship with this bookstore. Like so many of us, I've had a 20-year love affair with Politics and Prose.
People always ask us, how we're doing, especially after the pandemic, which was so difficult for all local retail businesses. And I always joke, well, we're still here, and we are still here, and we are doing well, and we hope to be here for another 40 years.
Helpful maybe to remember that when we became owners of Politics and Prose back in 2011, There were a lot of serious people making dire predictions about the future of physical books and the future of independent bookstores. Well, guess what? That hasn't happened. Number of independent bookstores in general in the country has now grown substantially, even with the pandemic. And obviously, you know, Politics and Prose is still here, and we've grown significantly over the last decade and a half. So looking ahead, you know, I think it's a fair prediction that we're gonna be here for some time.
So thank you so much for joining us over these last 40 years.
From Washington, D.C. and beyond.
So many books.
So little time.
We
We
are Politics and Prose.